let's talk about using a sword and a shield. Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan, also known as the PC Genie. This is one half of a viewer's wish. They wanted me to respond to a person who was in another YouTube video trying to teach sword and shield fighting. It was a mixed bag. There were some parts that were fine and some parts that weren't so good. I've tried to do it in this sort of format, talking about swords and shields, but ended up going well over 9 minutes. So I'm going to try to condense it into a proper lesson here and responding to the specific parts of the video in another dedicated video. So let's talk about the shields for starters. So clearly we've got different kinds of shields. Some are smaller and some are larger, but they're also different types of grips. So you can have a centre gripped shield which rotates around the hand and of course is held just to one hand and is not actually secured to the arm. And then you have strapped shields like this Targe I've got here. Now the differences in their most condensed and simplest, the biggest differences between centre gripped shields and strap shields are that strap shields like this brace better. So let's say I'm out here and I'm defending an attack coming this way, rather than it sort of rotating in my hand, like with this. So let's say someone thrusts at me, I could have my shield out here and then bam, it turns the shield and then bam, same sort of thing again. This can be both good and bad, depending on different styles and Matt Easton's favourite word, the context of what's happening. With something like a strapped shield, this doesn't happen. Again, that can be a good thing, or it can be a bad thing. There isn't, as far as I can tell, there's no particular superiority. You know, sometimes it's actually really useful to have a centre grip and to use that pivoting to your advantage, and there are circumstances where you just want a strapped shield that stays where you place it. Now in terms of how a centre grip shield can be used, let's say I go for this. So this is an arming sword, just a basic sort of medieval sword, and this buckler. So if I was attacking and I wanted to cover the hands whilst delivering a cut, I can of course cut out like that. I've got my arms forward, I'm covering my sword arm so it doesn't get chopped wide open, and I can turn the shield out to do that. Additionally, let's say I cut around the other side, I can do this. And it's very easy with a centre grip shield to turn the shield around. I don't have to completely move the arm. Now there was one technique I saw which was in a sort of Highland broadsword, which was doing this. This is actually a mortuary sword, but I was actually quite confused when I first saw the technique, but I found it later worked when sparring against the guy who taught me. So let's say I'm cutting around here, and I can obviously block one angle while I'm using the shield to attack either a similar angle or a different angle. If I was to try and parry the other side, like let's say here, rather than just being able to turn like you saw earlier, I have to pretty much do this, or better still, things like that, so I'm keeping a sort of a cone of defence, and even something like using the sword to parry. And that's one of the things I saw in one of the Scottish broadsword systems when I went to fight camp, which I was taught by Jonathan Spouge. It goes in thirds when you're using this sort of strapped shield and this sort of basket hilted sword. So 1/3 up here is covered by the shield, 1/3 covered up here is covered by the sword, and then if anyone tries to attack you in the legs, just walk or step in a way that pulls that leg out of harm's way. And then you can do the entire system based on that. But if I'm trying to, let's say, turn the shield from this side to covering that side, there was in a separate Scottish broadsword system a technique which showed doing this. So I've gone and actually turned the shield around, almost tied myself up, and in the meantime I've got my sword primed here to do something like a thrust. So I'm not completely just blocking, I can block whilst attacking still. But it's obviously a bit awkward at times because I'm not using a centre grip shield like this. So I can just go, here's my attack, I'm going to go this side, turn, 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 turn. It's very easy, and you can imagine this with a larger shield as well. I can deliberately just turn, I'm attacking around here, or even under, like there. I turn, I attack around here and here. So those are some very key dynamics that change between centre grip shields and strapped shields. Besides that, you see a very key difference happen between whether you've got a basket hilted sword or if you've got something like a medieval sword. Because the difference is, excuse me, if I keep my sword arm out here, it's going to get cut wide open. Any time where I'm extended like that, and people who do things like SCA, historical European martial arts or other sparring of swords, will probably have noticed that when they're swinging out of the sword, at any time they can get hit in the hands, and especially in things like Hema longsword, people get struck in the hands very often, and I mean very often. In fact, I've known myself as a bit of a hand carver, because as soon as I see that sword out, bam, gotcha! You know, chop the hand open. You don't need as powerful a cut to slice fingers off as opposed to trying to decapitate or sever an arm or a leg or something. Easy killings or injuring. With a an arming sword or something else that has this sort of hilt that doesn't cover the hand, it's actually better to try and keep the sword back. It's the same with or without a shield. So I could be up here on my shoulder. In Fiore's system, this is called the Guard Lady. It's a bit like you're going to swing a baseball bat, wham! Same sort of thing, one-handed, bam! You can also do it on the other side, like that. There's the window, so I've got my point forward, but I'm keeping the actual sword arm. So I'll show you this angle. I'm keeping the sword arm back. It's either here around sort of level with my head, or even I retract it slightly, so I'm more primed to do something like a thrust. Additionally, there's stuff like here. This is the long tail, so this is similar to what's going on up here, but down low. And I can maybe cut up or do some kind of defence. I can also go somewhere like up here. Not much room in this ceiling. But that's the idea with something like an arming sword, where I do not want to expose my sword arm and get cut open. With something like a sabre, mortuary sword, Scottish broadsword, or anything else that has a basket hilt, I can now keep my sword arm in front of me. So it very much follows in things like anyone who studied British military sabre, or even Olympic fencing sabre, that's perfectly fine. You've got your sword arm in front of you, as much as you want. If you can see something trying to come in and cut you open on your arm, or even elsewhere on your body, it's just a simple turn to defend. So let's say I'm covering here, so that's covering this angle. I don't even need to move my hand if someone cuts there and is really stupid. If they're trying to cut me, say here, I just go, I've blocked it. Keep the sword point on line. I can cut, I can thrust, and I just realised I said cut when I thrust and thrust when I cut, but pretend that didn't happen. But the idea is being able to keep the sword in front of you completely changes the dynamics. And not just sword on its own, but also when you introduce a shield. So one of the things I saw, I can't remember which of the Scottish manuals it was, but there was this one particular technique, or in terms of stance, where you actually can use the shield passively. So of course there's stuff like doing this, you kind of, you know, can adapt it to the body, but there was one where you go completely wholesale. Let's say you don't know how to use your shield properly, or you don't want to kind of tie yourself up trying to do things. Instead, you just do this. Bam! I have a basket hilted sword. Let's say I'm an English, you know, sabreur, and I don't know what the hell to do with a shield. This is a perfectly viable tactic, because this is now essentially like a piece of armour. I can completely ignore it. I can maybe just, you know, pretend my arm is stuck to my chest. I've got the shield there, which does still do its purpose, and of course any potentially fatal cuts or thrusts around the torso are now covered. Yes, I've got my head and my legs exposed, but now I know that I'm going to get attacked either very high in the head or very low in the legs. Makes the person have to go more extreme in their attack. So then I can just do everything else with the sword as if it's sabre, so I can be maybe outside guard, inside guard, hanging guard, cuts, thrusts, all of that. Something like an arming sword, on the other hand, I cannot do that. Now, I need to pull that sword behind me. Yes, I can make sure that I don't get my sword cut off, sorry, sword arm cut off, by introducing the shield in what I call tight action. And I've noticed this most especially in the I-33, 133, Tower manuscript, whatever you want to call it, that system of sword and buckler, which assumes you're not wearing armour, where a lot of the time it seems to be the sword and the shield come out together. The buckler covers the sword arm and stops it from getting hit. It means I can form a defence, because of course it's a shield and covers more than the sword does, and additionally it stops any direct attacks to the sword arm. So somewhere like out here, I could still get struck around here, I could still get, you know, counter-attacked, or even someone could try to cut me in the arm. With the shield out here, I could maybe just do something like this, extending out, I'm able to thrust or disengage for a new cut, and you'll see here I've got myself covered in the head now with the buckler. Thrust out maybe by walking into them. I've got many more options and choices because of the fact that I have this buckler and it covers the sword arm. This can also work with a strap shield. So when I cut out, again, I cover my sword arm. I can use the shield separately to the sword. I don't have to have them following each other like they're conjoined twins, but I want to make sure that I'm not exposing my sword arm when I shouldn't be. So one example of this is from the stuff that I've seen in the Scottish treatises and that was taught. You can, for example, cover high, attack low. You could, for example, cover, so you've got the sword bound here. I then cut around the legs. Or another one that I saw, I need to step further back because the angle's too high. There was one technique I saw which was like something out of a movie, like Patriot or something garbage like that, but a very viable technique, which is you basically cover your head like this, you get down on one knee and thrust. Now of course if I thrust out like this, sword arm's exposed, but if I know where the opponent's sword is, so it's on top of the shield here, bam! I'm thrusting into the opponent, foolishly charging at me. I've got the top of me covered, and while in the meantime I have delivered an attack, which can even be another advantage of swords and shields in general. Now if you've just got a sword, whether it's one-handed or two-handed, or any other kind of single weapon, one-handed or two-handed, it's quite difficult at times to do what's called a single-time defence. Now that's just a HEMA term. When me or others say single-time defence, what we mean is it's very different to a two-time defence. So a two-time defence, let's say I'm doing sabre, it would be someone does a cut, parry, riposte. That's a two-time defence. Or let's say I've got an arming sword and maybe I do a beat. So there you go, swing, I beat it to the floor, cut up at them. That's a two-time defence. There's one sort of action to stop yourself from getting killed, and there's the second action to deliver something back to the opponent. Now there are certain attacks which can be done, like I think it's called, it's not the Zornhau, the Zwerhau, it's one of those things. There's some sort of thing called the Wrath stroke. I'm not very good at German, you'll notice, but basically where you attack into the attack, you sort of take the opponent's sword and then hit them, so you're sort of powering through, taking their sword in a bind, and also pushing further through to cut them. And if you're doing it with enough force, you basically smash out, you cut them open, and you take their sword away in one hit. But all this is a bit difficult, because, you know, you've got to have all these advanced techniques, you've got to know what the person's doing, you've got to do the correct type of attack. If you do it wrong, you might well hit the opponent and get hit yourself, or you will end up doing sort of just a standard parry, excuse me, which doesn't hit the opponent single time, it gives them a chance to react. So let's say I've parried, and then I try to riposte, bam, or, you know, parry, I try to thrust, and then it all turns bad. With a shield, single-time defence is so much easier from what I've found in sparring. All you have to do is, you know, the person's attacking bam, you know, let's say they're trying to split my head open, instead of going bam, bam, which is a 2-time defense, or maybe going do this and then do a whole disarm and all those things, you just go bam. It's all in one action, because my left arm does something, my shield arm does something to stop the attack, and my sword arm does something to attack back. Or even, depending on the scenario, you could very well do it the other way around. So let's say I'm parrying out here with the sword, and I'm going to smash their face into the shield. I mean, it's maybe not something I'd personally recommend, but it's just an example off the top of my head. So I go, BAM! And it's all in one action. So my sword arm has done the defending, and my shield arm has done the attacking. And maybe while they're staggering, bring it in for something else. Again, these are just ideas off the top of my head. But the idea is, when you've got something that does one action, and then in the same tempo, the same time, you've got something separate to do an attack with, it's a big advantage. Which is actually one of the reasons why dual wielding is good for a duel, not a different kind of duel. So you can actually parry with one sword and attack with the other sword, which can go either way. And that's one of the advantages. It's just not so viable on the battlefield, because either you've got something like a shield, or you can't carry enough stuff. Anyway, that's a little digression, but you get the idea. So those are some of the things that you can do with shields, and you can hear my voice is going now, which is because this has taken about 12 attempts. I've still ended up waffling a lot, but I'm happy with what's gone on. So yes, that's, a 15, how long has it been now? 17 minute nutshell of how this sort of thing works. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and see you in the next video. Ta-ra for now.